Hello, my name is Nick Deborah, and in this short video, I wanted to talk about the alignment of numbers in columns within tables. And of course, the sort of common wisdom out there is that it makes sense to always right align the numbers in a table. And there are good reasons for this, right? The main ones being that everything is nicely lined up if we right align, right? The tens lined up with the tens, the thousands with the thousands, and I can very easily see numbers that have sort of additional digits, right? So there are good reasons for this. If we were to center align the numbers, for example, then things don't really line up anymore, right? The tens don't really line up with the tens, the thousands don't really line up with the thousands. And same if we were to left align, we'd kind of basically have sort of the same problem, right? However, what if our data looked like this? This is actually based on a table that somebody showed me in a training workshop recently. And they were like, okay, I followed the rule. I went with right alignment, but it doesn't look great, right? I have this sort of big empty gap here, and the numbers below the heading here don't really, they look like they're almost a bit disconnected. They're maybe a bit kind of offset. And so in a situation like this, the first thing that I try and do is to basically try to kind of squeeze that middle column, and so we can get rid of that big sort of empty space. But can't always do that, right? Sometimes there are times where we might not be able to kind of word wrap within a cell like this. And so we have to show everything all in line. We're going to have this big space. And so this is a situation where I might actually center align the numbers. And so this way, certainly to my eye anyways, it's clear that these numbers are associated with this heading, right? They're not associated with this column over here, for example, which is kind of what it looked like before. And so, yeah, I think I'd probably actually center align, even though now technically, things don't line up as well, right? The tens don't line up the tens, the hundreds don't line up the hundreds, but I think that's a worthwhile sort of compromise. And in fact, even if I could squeeze the column and make it narrower, I still might even consider center aligning the numbers in a situation like this, especially when they don't have drastically different numbers of digits. But if you disagree, let me know in the comments. There's another situation that sometimes comes up, which looks like this, where we basically have a bunch of numbers like KPIs, for example, where they're just all kind of apples and oranges. I have customer satisfaction on 10, profit margin percentage, average order value in dollars, very, very different. And so, technically we're supposed to right align numbers, but I actually do things a little differently in a situation like this. If I have numbers that are not directly comparable with one another, which would certainly be the case here, I'll actually left align these numbers because I don't want people lining up the tens with the tens and the thousands with the thousands in a situation like this, right? Like I said, these numbers are not directly comparable at all. That's a convention that I use. You can, of course, decide if you want to use that yourself as well. If our values are textual, like this, right? We have this column of textual values here. Of course, I'm going to left align that for a couple of reasons. One being that it's just easier to read, right? As my eye gets to the end of each row, it knows where the beginning of the next row is. It doesn't have to keep on finding it. And so if I were to right align this, it would be harder to find the beginning of each row. And also, of course, we don't have to worry about comparing digits, right? Like the tens with the tens, the thousands with the thousands. This is text. The reason for right justifying numbers doesn't really apply here. But what if our text data looked something like this, right? Once again, I have this sort of long heading and it's creating all this empty space in my table, and the values below the heading look kind of offset from the heading itself. And so not ideal. Again, just like we did with numerical values, the first thing I do is I try and squeeze the column a little bit and get rid of that sort of white empty space. And, this might work well. But again, let's keep on pushing. And what if we can't do that? What if we have to put everything on a single row for our headers? And so what do we do there? Yeah, well, I would center align in this case as well, right? So trade-offs, right? It's not perfect because now, of course, the beginning of each row of text doesn't line up perfectly, but I think it's a worthwhile compromise. But again, let me know what you think in the comments. What do we do in practice, right? When we have a table of numbers or a column of numbers and we're trying to decide, do I left align, center align, or right align? There are obviously a number of things to consider. And so I have this adorable little decision tree to help guide you. The first question might be, do we have lots of empty space in the cells in our column of values? And if we don't, and the values are textual, well, we're going to left align, right? Pretty simple. If the values are not textual, i.e. they're numbers, then the next question might be, should the numbers be compared directly with one another? And if so, we're going to right align so that the tens line up with the tens and the thousands with the thousands. And my own convention, of course, is if they are numbers that should not be compared directly, like a list of KPIs, then we're going to left align in a situation like that. Coming back to this first question here, if we do have lots of empty space in the cells in our column, well, the next question is, can the column be narrowed so that we can just get rid of that empty space? And if we can, then we're going to go into this branch, right, and use our the logic we just talked about a moment ago. But let's say I can't, right? I cannot squeeze the column. It's I have to put this long heading all in one row. Well, that's where I think it makes sense to center align the values. As I mentioned, though, let me know if you agree, disagree with any of these recommendations. This is, by the way, just one of the things I talk about in my Practical Charts course, which I deliver usually about 2 or 3 times a year in public workshops. Most of the workshops I deliver are private, but my next public workshop is going to be online. And if you happen to be watching this before January 19th, that's when it kicks off, 4 half days for Practical Charts, and then there'll be 4 half days where I'll deliver my Practical Dashboards course. If this is of interest, you can check out my website, practicalreporting.com, and if you use the discount code webinar-01, you see on the screen right now, you get 20% off. Thanks very much for watching.